Hey guys, been perusing the video scene and some things just get you to thinking. I just want to get to the point of something in particular. You see the thing about the fire from Yahweh. Yahweh sends fire from Yahweh. Um, Abraham and the three men, and passages like that where the Trinitarian inserts Jesus into the passage, where you get no other hint that Jesus is there except for the simple fact that they say that's Jesus. So, what I do want to do is show you where, at least in several places in the Bible, I'm not even going to go through them all. It'd be the verses in John about seeing God, but in particular, in Timothy, First Timothy, it brings you into a direct conflict with Paul. And when you look at First Timothy and you go to verse, start at 15, which he will display at the proper time, he who is blessed and only sovereign, the King of kings, the Lord of lords, who alone has immortality, who dwells in unapproachable light, whom no one has ever seen or can see. To him be honor and eternal dominion. Amen. So, number one, Paul is pointing out who God is to him, clearly. But the bigger question is, if you're going to stick the God into the Old Testament as actually being physically seen, especially in the case of Jesus, and adding to it, well, I mean, he means in all of his glory. That's not what the text says. It doesn't say no man has seen God in all of his glory. It says no man has seen, who has ever seen or can see. So he's saying you can't. You literally can't see. Now think about that. Think about that in what, if Paul was in fact taught at the feet of Gamaliel, the foremost teacher of the law, and the Jews were well aware of Abraham and the three men or angels that he met, or messengers that he met. And he was well aware of Yahweh sending down fire from Yahweh. And he was well aware of the Garden of Eden and God walking among Adam and Eve. Yet he makes this statement, whom no one has ever seen. Now this is interesting because what is he doing? He's applying this to men, obviously. And if Jesus was a man, what does that mean? He says no one. He makes no exception. None. Zip. Zero. Zilch. And you see this in John as well. And you have that really bad translation of some Bible when it says the only begotten God. I think it's just based on all the other scriptures within John and statements like this, that translation can't be right. But it's the only begotten of God, who is in his bosom. He starts out that statement like that. He says, but no man has seen God, but it is the only begotten Son who is in the bosom of the Father who declares it. He doesn't even say Jesus saw him. He says it's the one that's in his bosom. So, you got to really think about statements like this. Paul makes no exception. And he would have been well aware of Moses being stuck in the crack of the mountain when God walked by and he covered him with his hand in a metaphysical sense so he wouldn't see God, for fear that he would have dropped dead. And when he makes a statement like this, go back to verse 13. I charge you in the presence of God, who gives life to all things, and to Jesus Christ. So the person who gives life to all things is someone other than Jesus. Think about that for a minute. Someone other than Jesus. There's a separation there. And of Christ, who in his testimony before Pontius Pilate made the good confession to keep the commandment unstained and free from reproach until the appearing of our Lord Jesus Christ, which he will display at the proper time. He is God. And it says, he who is blessed and only sovereign, the King of kings, the Lord of lords, who alone has immortality. Who alone has immortality. Jesus died, and his own claim in Revelation was, behold, I was once dead, but now I am alive forevermore. Excuse me. And then you could still argue, but then he says, who dwells in unapproachable light, whom no one has ever seen or can see. He makes no exception, and he talks about Jesus in verse 14. Yet in verse 16, he says, no one. That means no man. And if you believe Jesus was truly God and truly man, then you also have to believe that he has never seen God, nor can he see God. Think about that. No man. And in the biblical evidence in John says the same thing. No one has ever seen. And I did a video about this. Has anyone seen God or not? And it covers just the statements in John. And Jesus himself says it. Then no one's ever seen God. So they all point this out. Yet you, in your audacity as a Trinitarian, will go back and take Jesus' words and call him a liar and say, no, Jesus was there. They saw him. Then they saw God. And you can go, if you want, and try to modify this statement and say, well, he meant seeing God in all his glory. That's not what he says. That is not what the text says. The text plainly states over and over in the book of John, it's all over the place in the Bible, but this particular text, he's just pointing out, no one has ever seen God. Nobody. And then he says, or can see. So now he's only saying that people in the past haven't seen him. He's saying that you can't. You can't see him. He's the invisible God. That's the point Paul was making. So think about that, because I've seen some really good detailed answers to some of these passages and how to exegete, the three people, and some of them can be complex. But you also have to deal with passages like this then. If you're going to go the other way and say Abraham knew he saw Yahweh God in the form of Jesus, then Paul's a liar. Then Paul didn't understand. And you have to understand, Jews, and I thought about doing this, but I'm not. But if you go back to what Jews thought about that passage at the time, that would be the key. If you want to understand what Paul understood about fire from Yahweh, sent from Yahweh, and the three people that saw Abraham, if you want to understand what he thought about that, read the Talmud, read the Jewish perspective on those passages. But whatever you do, don't find yourself butting heads with a very clear common sense passage that Paul makes. Both cannot be true. You cannot say Paul believed that Jesus was God and Abraham saw Jesus in the Old Testament and then make a statement like this, who alone possesses immortality, who dwells in unapproachable light, whom no one has ever seen or can see. Because remember, and I'll point this out. He says, no one has ever seen or can see. To him be honor and eternal dominion. First of all, the triune God is not a him. It is a coalition of people. It is a Congress. It's a seating group of three people. The Trinitarian God is not a him. It's a quality. God becomes an it for you, which is a sad fact you have to learn to start admitting. God is not any singular person to you. He's three persons. That means the thing that makes them God has to be an it. It's a quality. It's already clearly shown that they don't share the same mind. They have different thoughts. You can say they operate, you can say all these things, but if you make them the same mind, then they become the same person. And you're a heretic. Your God is an it, but Paul's God is a him. And he says, no one has ever seen. To me, that's one of those de facto statements. Or can see. So he's just telling you it can't be done. No one in this life is going to see God the Father. And more importantly, no one in the past, in the text of the Old Testament, literally saw God. Even though Moses was in the crack of the mountain and saw God's glory. Even as close as he came, Paul says he didn't see God. So you can't have both being true. You can't have Paul teaching that Jesus was in the Old Testament and was God, and then have him turn around and say no one has ever seen God, or more importantly, can see God. Those two statements conflict with each other. And I won't personally, I would not let you play the word game and say, well, what he's saying is no one has ever seen God in all his glory. That's not what he says, and he could have plainly said that. And more importantly, wouldn't it make sense to you that if Jesus was God, when you go out and you make a statement like this, like Corinthians 8:6, or a statement like this, you would say no one has ever seen God, but we have beheld God in the flesh. He would modify his statement to keep it true. The point of thinking you need to understand is his statement becomes false if you are correct. But to keep his statement true, he would have to modify it. He would have to say no one has ever seen God in all his glory. Or no one has ever seen God but the God that was taking on flesh. He would have to say something to keep his statement true. And that's the problem of thinking. If one is not like the other, they're not the same God. If Jesus is flesh and the Father is not, they're not the same being. Not only are they two different persons, they're two different beings. They're not the same. To be the same God, you have to be the same. So what you do is you say he's the same in a category. He's the same in a way. The fact remains, yet he's different. And if he's different, then he's different from God. But think about that. Think about these common sense statements you find throughout the Bible that come into direct contradiction to with what you believe if you're a Trinitarian. And more importantly, if Paul was a Trinitarian who thought Jesus was in the Old Testament, how he can make statements like this: whom no one has ever seen or can see. And then he tells you, to him be honor and eternal dominion. To him, not it. Three people is not a him. The only way that they're the same in your theology is that they share a quality. And I would tell you, if they share a mind, then they become the same person. So, chew on that. There's no way Paul can believe what you said he believes when you take statements like Corinthians 8:6 and then statements like this in Timothy. There's no way. It's just not possible, because he'd be contradicting himself. Remember, there's one God. He's one person. He's always treated that way in the Bible. And if you just take that basic premise that one God is one person, you eliminate these contradictions. And you can start focusing on the true mysteries of God. The mystery of God is not the Trinity. The mystery of God is his will and attribute and things being manifested in men. The mystery of God is creation. There's so many great things to call the mystery of God. The Trinity is not one of them. God bless.